Hello, my name is Andrew Smuskiewicz, and welcome to the Salvation from Destruction podcast. When I retired, I realized I needed to relax. I needed to decompress. And I really didn't know how to do that. And it's funny how God works. I was going through the local paper one day, and I saw this place called Henry's Horse and Human Sanctuary was having a chili cook-off. So I decided to research it, and I found out that Henry's Horse and Human Sanctuary was a place where veterans and first responders could come and relax and find themselves again by being in nature and working with horses and learning about horses. So today's special guest is the founder of Henry's Horse and Human Sanctuary, a very sweet and fantastic woman who had a huge part in my healing, Donna Stedman. How are you?
Well, you're going to make me cry, and we haven't even started yet.
It's the truth.
This has all been a God thing because there's been too many synchronicities, too many little miracles, too many ridiculously impossible things that have happened over the years. And honestly, who the hell am I to ever pull something like this off? I could have never, but he can.
I want to do a deep dive into that because your story is so unique and it's so special. And undeniably so, God had a hand in that, in everything that you did, because Henry's is such a unique place. And I really just want you to just start from the beginning.
I'll try not to get off on too many rabbits.
That's okay.
So I can easily, but I was just a simple farm girl from Indiana, northern Indiana, and ended up loved horses. Got my first pony when I was 5 years old. It was a little pony named Queenie, she was just a little pony from hell. She used to buck me off, kick me, scrape me against everything, drag me around our farm. My dad was a doctor and had a farm in Indiana. He also ended up having fruit farms up in Michigan and stuff. Come from a big Catholic family. Just grew up very simple and hardworking and nothing special. And I went through all of my years of school, getting every single teacher putting on my report card, not living up to her potential.
Really?
I was a B and C student all through school, taking the minimum amount that I could get by with. My heart was never in school. It was never, I was never that driven person. I loved horses and I loved being out in nature. And I got my first jumper show horse when I was, I think, about 14, and just lived outside every second that I could. That was where my heart was. When I'd be upset about something, I'd go sleep out in the stall with my horses, And then I went to nursing school when I was 17 and got kicked out twice. And because I wasn't taking it too seriously, I loved the discos, back in the late 70s.
Hey.
I'm 65, so this was back in the late 70s. And ended up becoming a respiratory therapist, worked in intensive care units and ICUs for about 10 years, moved to Florida to get the heck out of the cold weather of northern Indiana. I had gone on spring break vacations down to Fort Lauderdale, so after doing a little bit of research, I figured out that's where I wanted to live, and ended up meeting my husband down there, started popping out kids. My husband was 30 years older than me, and one day I was just realizing that here I am living the American dream life. I was living in a 6,000 square foot home on the golf course in the Woodlands, Texas, a beautiful community. I had 2 small young children, a wonderful husband that I was in love with and finally married to, who was 30 years older than me. And he was doing a lot of traveling because he had companies kind of around the world. And I started to realize I'm living the American dream life, and yet I am not here fulfilling my purpose. I've missed what I'm here for, and I don't know what that is. And it started to really nag at me. And I started for about 3 or 4 months, every night I was on my face before I went to bed on the floor, just saying, Lord, I would really appreciate some kind of a clue about what my purpose is here on this earth, because this is driving me crazy. And so for whatever reason, I was blessed enough that when I went to a ladies' retreat with our church, it was Fellowship of the Woodlands at the time, we were out having lunch with these group of 30 or 40 ladies. And after I had eaten, I had this voice say to me, Donna, this is it. You're asking about your purpose in life. And I'm here to tell you that you're going to have a retreat center like this someday. And I looked around at this beautiful retreat center that we were at, and I said, first words out of my mouth was, excuse me? Excuse me. I had never heard a voice, but it was clear as this conversation.
Wow.
And he said, I call it a he, but it wasn't a he or she voice. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm here to tell you that you're going to have a retreat center like this someday, that keep seeking me. And when the time is right, I'll take care of the land, the money, and the people. So he said, the things that I really remember about it were things like, it's going to be better than anything you could ever imagine in your wildest imagination. Stop worrying about what anybody else thinks about you and start spending 100% of your time seeking to know me, seeking to know yourself, seeking what's important in life, and just told me things like, everything that's ever happened to you in your lifetime, and this is true for all of us, everything that's ever happened to you in your lifetime since the parents that you chose to come to this earth to where you were going to live, to what kind of professions you were going to be in, who you were going to marry, everything has been chosen by you, prepared for you, and everything that you have in your lifetime that lights you up or that you hate is there for a reason, to guide you towards the purposes that you came here in for life. And I know enough now from my years and years of spiritual studies and I know this makes me sound like a complete nutcase to most people, and I'm aware of that.
No, go ahead.
Because here was this good Catholic girl that became a non-denominational Christian girl. I did 7 years of BSF, Bible study fellowship. I followed all the rules of what I was supposed to do with the church. But after this conversation, and I went home and when I stopped arguing with him, because I had to argue with this voice and say, my husband's never going to leave this golf course community. I have these 2 small children to raise. This sounds wonderful, but, like a dream come true, because I've always been an outdoors, love nature person. And basically when I stopped arguing with him about all this stuff, then they actually took me on a virtual tour of it. So I got to, like a hard tour that you see online to go look at houses.
Yeah.
I got to actually walk through the retreat center and see it. And like the gist of it was, there's going to be a bunch of animals out there, a bunch of barns and buildings, that it's going to be very rustic, very country. I remember walking through some woods, down some steps to the lake, flower beds everywhere, a very strong sense of peace and tranquility there. That was remarkable. The only thing that I really got the details about was that it was going to have the lodge. It's going to have a lake house, a greenhouse, a bunkhouse, and it's going to have barns for the animals and stuff. But the lodge was really unusual. That is going to be a beautiful big lodge that's very casual. It looked like everything in there was donated. Nothing matched, It was very casual, very rustic. But I remember the auditorium, which was, I've never seen anything like it. Every auditorium I've ever been in, you walk in and there's chairs and you just have a stage up there and somebody's performing, or speaking or something like that. But this auditorium was a stage in the middle with levels, like 4 or 5 levels on 4 sides of basically like 10 to 12 foot floors, with couches and chairs spread around them. And you came down steps, and you could go out on any of those levels and find a comfortable couch to sit on. But the stage itself was down here, and I've never seen anything like that. But that's what I was shown. And so that's what I figure.
That's amazing.
I'm going to have someday,
Right.
And he showed me the details of the kitchen and the bedrooms. And again, nothing is fancy, but it's all comfortable, and it's just, I walked away from this conversation. When I got out of this, I was sitting up, the girls had all gone back in to listen to the speaker speak. And so I was just sitting out there around the picnic table by myself. And I went back in and I told a couple of my best girlfriends that were there with me. And of course, I called my husband, called my mom, called a couple of my sisters and stuff, and told them about this conversation that I'd had with, I don't know who. I thought it was God, but now I'm not so sure that it wasn't just my higher self. or the Holy Spirit or my guardian angel or who knows, But he did say to me, keep seeking me. And so I'm not sure even now whether that means keep seeking what we mean by God or keep seeking who I am as one with God. I'm not sure about that, but I call it my conversation with God because that's what I thought of for so many years, and that's what I assumed it was. But everybody just all thought I was adorable. And they just assumed that I had dozed off and had dreamed this. And I said, no, this was a full out conversation. I'd never heard a voice in my head before, but it changed everything in my life. From that minute when I drove home from that retreat center after all my girlfriends just thought I was adorable.
That's great.
Stopped at Blockbuster because that's where we used to get our video.
I remember Blockbuster. I did too. I remember that.
And walked in and said, do you have any videos on anything to do with God? Because I'd been raised Catholic. I'd gone to a Billy Graham crusade when I was 16, gave my heart to Christ, had been married a guy that was Christian Scientist. And I had gone to the Christian Science Church for a number of years. And that's not the same as Scientology. It's a Christian religion that follows the Bible. Had been through 7 years of Bible study fellowship, had been going to this Fellowship of the Woodlands Church for a number of years, just really had embraced Christianity my whole life. But I got that video, Conversations with God, by Neil Donald Walsh, and took it home and watched it. And it just told a little bit about his story, about how he said, God, I'm done. I'm putting a bullet in my head tomorrow unless you can give me some reason why not to. And God said, would you be willing to do some work for me? And this was a conversation he had in his head. And he said, yes. And so he said, would you write for me? And he pulled out a pad and a pen and started scribing the words that came into his mind.
Yeah.
It was none of his words. It was total scribing. And he ended up writing 3 books called Conversations with God. So, of course, I took that video back to Blockbuster the next day, went right to the bookstore and bought those 3 Conversations with God books. And that started me on a whole new path of opening my mind up to maybe the Catholic upbringing I had, maybe the Christian church that I went to and all the teachings that I had weren't all. Maybe there was a lot more I needed to learn, because I thought at 35 years old after this conversation that I was ready. That summer, we went to High Hampton Inn in North Carolina as a vacation for a family. And I've spent the entire couple of weeks we were there going, I wonder if this is a place. I wonder if this is a place.
Wow.
Everywhere I went, I kept thinking, I wonder if this is a place, because I was so excited about this idea of the retreat center, and I thought I was ready. But I didn't realize I had 20 more years of studying, 20 more years of preparing for this and studying every religion as deeply as I could, raising my kids, got into my husband's business, ended up working as an independent rep, selling his acoustical ceiling tiles that he and his father had invented and put up plants around the world with. Having another son, so 3 kids, just living my life, doing the best I could, but still spending every free minute that I could learning what we mean by the word God and studying everything. And one of my sisters up in Indiana got a cancer diagnosis. It was a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. They told her she'd have just a couple more months to live, go ahead and wrap up her life, because it had metastasized enough through her body that they didn't feel any treatment would help her. And so she quit her practice as a radiologist, cashed out her business savings, and gave each of us siblings a $13,000 goodbye gift. That was the non-taxable amount. Don't look like that. She's still alive. That was 13 years ago. She just got rid of the things in her life that made her unhappy, like working as a radiologist, where she really didn't get a chance to give the patients the kind of treatments that she thought they deserved and wanted, because she was working for a medical practice, and medicine is turned into a business. And they were telling her, you've got to read 25 MRIs per hour, or you're not making money for our practice. And so instead of letting her go to the charts and learn about her patients or ever meet them and have conversations with her, she was being forced into the medical profession in a way that was making her very unhappy. And because she's such a good, conscientious radiologists that wanted to do the right thing. And being a radiologist, that's the kind of a thing where you're making or breaking somebody's diagnosis. Their lives are in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, she's fine. She's still alive, but she ended up walking away from all the things in her life that caused her so much stress and unhappiness. And within about 3 or 4 months after that, she got a clean bill of health. Her cancer was 100% gone, and she never got any treatment other than removing the initial tumor.
Tell me that's not God.
I mean, completely a God.
I have goosebumps right now. Look at this.
Just spent the next 20 years just studying everything I could, reading the Bhakti Gita, the Tao, studying the Kabbalah, just doing everything I could to try to, and not just spirituality, but if I kept going down. It's funny how when you make the decision that you want to know more, you become a seeker of the truth, not the truth of what your mind tells you, not the truth of what your conditioning tells you that you've been told your whole life. But when you start paying attention to the mind in your heart instead of your brain, because you do have a mind in your heart, and that's what we should be listening to. That's where our emotions come from. But when I started to pay attention to how to listen to my heart instead of just my mind and just my old conditioning, it is just amazing how many books would fall in my lap, how many people I would meet and have a conversation with that I'd be sitting next to in an airplane or something, that would just be life-changing for me. And I think that's one of the most astounding things about my life is just how God can use an extremely average, nothing special person to do extraordinary things through if you just say yes. If you just say, I want to know more, I want to know how best I can serve you. I want to know best how I can serve fellow mankind, and the doors just open and the books fall into your lap. And now you don't even have to have books because now you can watch podcasts and do videos and you get so much wonderful information. But so my one sister got that diagnosis of cancer. And then another sister who was living with me because she was bipolar and she had gone through a divorce. We both had our $13,000. And I had always been kind of nagging her, you got to get out of bed every day and use your body or it's going to start falling apart on you sooner or later. And so she went horseback riding with one of my brothers up in Michigan on a January trip up there. There was a foot of snow on the ground.
I was going to
She had
say.
been on a horse for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was just another ridiculously impossible thing that got put into place. And she came back and said, I think if I got a horse, that would get me out of bed every day. Well, I'd always been the one that had the horses. And she loved horses, but she'd never had one. It was a rough time in our life. There were rough times, many rough times that I went through in my life. But I look back at them now and I'm grateful for every one of them because they all played a part in where I went and how it all turned out, that I would never want to miss out on any part of this, And so my sister said, let's get, and she said, I think, if I get a horse. So I said, okay, well, why don't I get a horse too then? Because I didn't know when I was ever going to get another horse, but they were the love of my life. And so I went over to the SPCA and picked out Lexi. There was about 60 horses in this big pasture. It was right at the end of our 18-month drought. We'd had a drought and where a lot of ranchers and farmers had to let their animals go because they couldn't afford to feed them. They didn't have grass and hay was 3 times as expensive because they were bringing it in from out of state.
Was that down here or was it up in, okay.
Up down here.
Okay.
And so in 2010 and 2011, we had an 18-month drought. The whole damn state of Texas tried to burn down.
Wow.
You were lucky to still be up in
right.
Chicago during that time worrying about the snow while we were burning up.
Yeah.
But I went over to the SPCA and there were 60 horses in this pasture and I picked out Lexi. She's this big, black, beautiful, kind of a thoroughbred cross. And I couldn't ride them, so I didn't know anything about them. I knew she had come in with a 5-month-old little filly at her side that they said was the most beautiful little filly they'd ever seen. But they had to euthanize it because it was too failure to thrive to be able to to keep around because she came in so thin that she didn't have enough milk to feed it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked out Lexi right away. And then this little lineback dun, this little brown horse that was just kind of a medium size named Leo, kept following me around for 4 hours while I was out in that pasture meeting all those horses, saying, I want to go home with you. I want to go home with you. And I kept saying, go away. You're not what I'm looking for. And finally, at the end of that 4 hours, I finally said to this little lineback dun, okay, get in the damn trailer. You can come home with me. And so that's how I got Henry. And the reason I changed his name from Leo to Henry was because my sister Maureen, who I was getting these horses with, had always called my younger brother, Grant, from the day he was born, she always called him Little Henry.
Really?
I have absolutely no idea why, but that's whose horses she had ridden that got her to want a horse. So I thought I needed to name it after Little Henry. So that's what I named him. Got those 2 horses. We brought them into a place where we could board them for real cheap. I think I called my daughter. I think she was the first one that I called and said, I got 2 horses. She was at college at Texas A&M. I said, I got 2 horses. Don't tell your dad.
That's a pretty big secret to hide from Dad.
Pretty big secret, yeah. But
Right.
my sister Maureen had found us a cheap place to board that was close by. And so anyways, I got those 2 horses and started learning back about everything horses, just learning how to work with them on the ground, work with them in the arena, riding them again and stuff like that. Just got back into horses. Was doing trail riding with one of a few of the other boarders, and they were becoming my friends. And when I started to get into more natural horsemanship, like what you're learning out at the sanctuary, I started to realize that where I was boarding them, they were handling their horses terrible.
Really?
So rough. And I wanted to get out of there. I didn't like the energy of the place. I didn't think it was a safe place for my horses to be, or me either, my energy. And so I found another family down the road. And it's funny because when I went there to ask them if they take on 2 more boarders, they said, no, forget it. We already got 13 horses. We can't feed and exercise the horses we have. Why would we want to take 2 more? Well, I talked him into letting me board there, but it was with the agreement that I would help them exercise and pay for their horses.
Really?
I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Not a clue. But I knew I wanted to board there because I wanted to stay on the Greenway trails, the Spring Creek Greenway trails that I'd been riding on. A week after I moved there and started exercising their horses and getting to know them a little bit, I had a dream. And that's the first time I've ever had a lucid dream that lasts 2 nights in a row. And it told me that I should start a little trail riding business called Just Us Gals and our horses, and that would help pay for the horses. And so they gave me all the details about it, and they told me to start a website and call it and get the name justusgals.com. So the next morning I called my daughter and said, how the hell do I get a website? How do I get a name like this? She said, call GoDaddy and get the domain name. So I called GoDaddy and they said, give us a couple of choices because you're not going to get that one. That one's going to be too common, justusgals.com. And I said, no, that was what I was told I had to get.
And that was in your dream?
In my dream.
Yeah.
The guy came back 5 minutes later and he said, lady, I can't believe it, but you got justusgals.com. And I said, I knew I was going to. That's what I was told. Wow. So I started, just a friend of mine, a neighbor, started a little website for me. We built it. I put out flyers to get my friends and neighbors to come go trail riding with me. Started taking in more horses. Went and adopted Wally and Tabby and Jinx and a few more horses over the next couple of years. And where I had been originally was getting kind of ticked off at me having my own trail riding business because I was competing with them.
Okay, so
just down the road from where I had been before. Okay,
so this is the border that you were talking about, like the boarding people. So they were starting to kind of get a little upset
with me because I was competing with them.
Oh,
and so they got one of the homes in our neighborhood, which was 2 houses down or 2 roads down, but we had deed restrictions. They didn't, where I was boarding my horses. So they were going to file a lawsuit against my family where I was boarding from because we were running a business out of there. And that ended up becoming somehow the Houston Chronicle newspaper found out about it and sent out a reporter to do an article on us getting harassed by a neighbor for deed restrictions, which were 60 years old and nobody else was following them.
Right.
Anyways, that whole newspaper article. I think it came out on July 5th of 2014, 15, something like that. Anyways, it was on the front page of the Sunday Chronicle, and it's a big, beautiful couple-page article with a big picture of Chandler on the front,
Right.
saying this is a sanctuary, a horse sanctuary that was not wanted in this neighborhood anymore. And the way that at the time, the way I became a nonprofit was one night I was sitting out with some of my regular riders that did trail riding with me, and we were around a little campfire that I'd built, and I realized, God, you've got somebody here with law experience, and you've got somebody here with financial experience, and you've got somebody here with nonprofit experience. And one of my veterans was out there too. And I'd always let my veterans ride free or for a real discounted price if they wanted to pay something. Because my oldest son, Sam, had gone to West Point, graduated in 2010, and was an Apache pilot. And I think he was on his first or second deployment at that time into the Middle East. And so I just kind of had a heart for veterans. You can imagine. I'd watched his personality change over the years of being deployed and being in the Army. And so I was just like, Lord, you're going to start this friggin' retreat center by way of these horses, aren't you? And I've been waiting 20 years for them, and doing crazy stuff like going to garage sales for 20 years, collecting picnic baskets for my retreat someday.
Really? So for that long?
It never left my mind. Not for a minute of my life did it leave my mind that I was going to be having a retreat center someday. But I didn't know how, when, where. I didn't know. I kind of made a little pact with God. I said, okay, I'll do this if you'll make it in someplace where they speak English, because I suck at languages. It's got to be someplace warm and someplace humid, because I don't do dry weather and I don't do cold weather very well. I said, if you'll do those things, then I'll do whatever it takes to build this retreat center or to have this retreat center. I said, have it, because he forgot to mention to me that I had to build it.
So that's a pretty big detail, right?
Well, and if he had mentioned that, then I probably would have taken a different path. Maybe I would have gone back to school and tried to get an MBA or, I don't know. He didn't want me to change anything. He wanted me to keep my focus on learning about him and deep dive spiritually. Working on myself really is what it boiled down to before I'd be ready to be able to do this. And so that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to start this as Henry's Home Horse and Human Sanctuary. Incorporated it, got a couple books about how to incorporate a nonprofit for dummies, literally, and incorporated it after about 3 months, filed the paperwork. I didn't have any money to spend on lawyers or anything like that. There were months when I was boarding. By now I had 6 or 8 horses, and there were months when I had $200 in my checking account at the end of the month when I had a $2,500 a month board bill. He always made sure that I had every bill paid every month, had all the people I needed to help me when I needed it, found me each time we moved to a better piece of land, a little bit better situation. He kept his promise, even though I had no idea that he was keeping his promise, because at this point I had no idea that this had anything to do with the retreat. I just thought I was building a nonprofit, for a horse sanctuary to help pay for them. And, but I had to call it a human sanctuary, because when I did figure out finally and incorporated it into Henry's Home and knew that it had something to do with a retreat, I called it a human and horse sanctuary, because I knew that this was for the horses, but I also knew that the purpose of this was for the humans. He had told me this would be a place where people come to heal their souls. He had mentioned that 3 times to me. He had mentioned, I'm going to take care of the land, the money, and the people, and this is a place where people are going to come to heal their souls. And so I had to call it a human sanctuary too, because I knew that's where this was eventually heading. However he was going to do it, I had absolutely no idea about. And so it just happened that the second in command at Johnson Development, who had just bought Camp Strake, Boy Scout property on 45, they had just bought that and were going to turn it into Grand Central Park. Just, where that is. It's right across from where our sanctuary is now. And there's 2,200 acres of beautiful trails and lakes and pavilions and bathrooms with electricity and plumbing and stuff, what I'd never had before.
Right.
And so I got this call and they said, we want to move your horse sanctuary onto our property that we just bought. And they weren't quite ready yet. So it turned out that the Everett and Jeanette Coverdale, who were the director of construction, he was the director of construction for that project, said, they're not quite ready for you yet, but we want to move you to our personal home. We have 5 acres on our personal home and it's fenced.
Really?
And you can move your horses. I think I had 8 of them at the time that I moved there. So we ended up going there for what was supposed to be about a month until they got this new land ready. Well, it turned out we were there a year and basically totaled their land. And, but they were such sweethearts about letting us keep our horses there. It wouldn't let us pay a penny.
Wow.
Just, slowly but surely taking in more horses. I think I got Willie Nelson while I was there. I got Chandler while I was there. We were there for about 3 years. When we finally did move on to Grand Central Park, they gave us, Everett continued to take great care of us over there.
Were you helping? I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt, but were you helping like the veterans and everything like that? At that
time, we still had a lot of veterans that were coming in and riding with us, and weren't really getting too involved yet. They were just coming and kind of hanging out with us, riding and helping out a little bit. When we moved to Grand Central Park, it wasn't too long after that I started. 4 of us volunteers got certified as EGALA, Equine psychotherapy, so that we could start working with the veterans with psychotherapy, because my mentor, Connie McNabb, had told me that that's what they did at Lone Survivor, and that's what she recommended that we do. So that's why we got our certification.
Can you explain what that is a little bit, please?
Yeah, that means that say you have a group of half a dozen veterans that want to come in and do this psychotherapy, then I'm going to have them go out into the pasture with my horses and do some kind of an activity. And it might look like maybe I'll put down some PVC piping to build a box and say to the veterans, okay, guys and girls, I need you to move 2 of the horses from this pasture into stand in that box, the PVC pipe box on the ground, and hold them there for a minute, but you can't touch them and you can't talk. So they have to use their body language, and they have to use their expression, and they have to express their emotions, and to be able to move that horse, because you can't force a 1,200, 2,000 animal to do anything. But your body language can move them. They're very sensitive animals. And so so they'd spend about 15, 20 minutes doing an exercise kind of like that. And then they would sit down with a therapist that we would have on our team for each one of the sessions to come in and talk about how they could use what they learned in their everyday life by what they learned from that horse. So they'd sit down for about 45 minutes with a therapist to talk about that.
Wow.
Well, we did that for a couple of years, and I can't tell you how many first responder meetings, chief meetings, regional chief meetings. I mean, we went to every fire department, every police department, every ambulance place, everything. I spent years going out and talking to first responders and veteran organizations, trying to tell people about what we were offering them for free, that this was really changing lives and a really great form of therapy. Well, I could never get one of my first responders to come out for that ever, because there was too much, and what's the word I'm looking for? There's stigma involved with ever seeking help for anything, even if it was 100% confidential and nobody else would ever know. They were never going to come out and do anything. And so finally, when I started talking to the veterans, Shannon, who I had running my sessions for me, she had moved away to start her own program at her house with her 3 horses that she moved over there away from our property. We had kept them on our property, moved them over to her home when she built it. And then I had to make a decision. Do I want to keep going with the psychotherapy that I've been working on for 3 years? Or did I want to change it to something else? Because that was the time to do that. I could have continued that. I was certified with that, and I still had the therapist and everything. But I thought, after talking to all my veterans and them saying Donna, the main reason you're having problems with getting more veterans and the reason you can't get any first responders out here is because you're using the word therapy. And you're saying that you're here to help us like we're broken. And all the stigma, that I just couldn't get past, they said to me. And the other thing is we don't want to spend 15 minutes with the horses and then 45 minutes in talk therapy. We can get talk therapy other places. We really come out there for that 15 minutes of the horse time. It's the horses that we love.
Wow.
And so I listened to what they said, and I said, okay, how about if we get rid of our equine psychotherapy program? Just knock it out of the water here and start a new program that allows you as a first responder or a veteran to come out and spend as much time with the horses as you want. Just learning how to groom, how to pairing up with them, coming out every day if you want to, just help us take care of them and also help us take care of the ranch. Because with the psychotherapy, we couldn't let them touch. If one of our veterans would have nailed a board onto my fence for me, I could have lost my certification because it's against their ethics rules because everything has to be so confidential and programmed for the therapy. And so they couldn't come out and volunteer at my ranch and be in the therapy program. They had to do one or the other. And more of my veterans were saying, thank you for the therapy, but we want to come out and volunteer. We want to come out and help you build buildings. We want to help you take care of the land. We want to feel needed. We want to feel like we've got a purpose. We've got these skills and we don't have any place to use them. We would love to come out, help you build buildings out at your place,
Wow.
It just changed everything for them. So we started what we called our equine learning program. And I changed the vocabulary completely and took the word therapy out of it. We call it therapeutic sessions or therapeutic riding or therapeutic stuff. But we changed the vocabulary to say, okay, you as a first responder, you can come out and spend as much time with the horses as you want. And thank you so much because we really need your help exercising and caring for these horses. And stopped making it sound like we were there to solve your brokenness and ask you to help us take care of these horses that come from rough backgrounds. A lot of them neglect, starvation, used up because they aren't needed on the racetrack anymore.
Can you talk about a couple
or anything
of them?
like that?
Can you talk just as a couple of the horses that are there, that some of the where they came?
My gosh, we have right now we've got we've got every variety of horses from 250-pound little minis. Who all have personalities that are bigger than any of the other horses and like to boss everybody else around to 2,000-pound percherons, and draft horses and everything in between. And some of them came from the SPCA that were confiscated for starvation. In most cases, some of them were donated to us. Some of them were just dropped off to us. I would take what horses I could. But when we got up to the point where we had 30 horses,
it's a lot.
That's a lot. And every one of them costs a lot of money and take a lot of time. And so we were at Grand Central Park for about 3 years. And slowly that door started to close. It became pretty obvious as they started to build out more around us.
Really?
And it just became obvious that God was closing that door. And it just happened that one of our wonderful volunteers, John and Linda Harrington, had bought a 21-acre piece of land and had owned it for about 10 years. It was 5 minutes away across the highway on 45 in Conroe. And they said, we want to donate this land to you. We want to donate this property to you. It'll take us about 3 months to get it emptied out. But would you be ready to move on there in January 1st of 2000? And I said, you bet. 21 acres, already had a big barn, had electricity, had wells. It was on a cul-de-sac that was a, dead-end street that was really private and quiet, was already pastured. Can you see how just watching God work, each place he's moved us to in the 5 moves that we've moved in the last 12 years has been bigger and better, but he never gave me what I wanted. I would have wanted where we are now 12 years ago. but I wouldn't have been ready for it. I didn't have the community support yet. I didn't have other veteran service organizations trusting us yet. That took years to build up.
Sure.
I didn't have the volunteers, the income. Just when we moved from Grand Central Park, and our budget was about $90,000 a year, to where we moved into this new property that we're on now, we moved into almost $400,000 a year of expenses.
Wow.
And where in the world am I going to get that from? Because that had every one of those donations through the whole 12 years we've been building Henry's home have been donations that have just come out of the air.
Really?
And I have never missed a bill, never once in the entire 12 years. He has kept our heads above water all the time, and it's got to be him.
It is.
Because what else
it
would it be?
%. And not to, stray from your story, but
that's it. That's pretty much it. Like another little miracle is just an example. Bob Graves was a really good friend of mine for years through this whole thing, and really supported me when we went through Harvey and we went through the flood of Harvey. I had to do an emergency evacuation of the horses. I think I had about 15 horses at the time off of Grand Central Park. And when I got back from that, I had to leave my truck there because I had to either take the horses out or I had to take my truck out and my tractor and my other stuff that I'd gotten over the years, or that were mine personally. And so I had to leave my truck there. So Bob came to me and said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I really need a pickup truck for Henry's home," And he basically gave us a pickup truck,
really,
along with Joe, the owner of Mercedes-Benz The Woodlands. They came together and donated a $26,000 pickup truck for us. That was exactly what we needed, that white one with the towing package.
Yeah.
Bob gave me, when we moved over to Grand Central Park, he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I need a place to store my stuff." He wrote me a check to write our tax shed out, which was Krista's home out there. We turned into a tiny house. Everything has been answered. But when my friend Bob died about 6 months before we made this move, his Jason, who's our board president now, came to me at the funeral and said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I just need everybody to know how much Bob meant to me and how much he was a help over all these years." And I kind of stood up at the end of the funeral and talked a little bit about how God used him to work on this place and to build this place. And Jason said to me, I think when I left that funeral, he said something about, "You haven't seen the last of me," or "We're going to continue to support you," or something. But anyways, when we moved there, on the day that we took the deed, on December 26th, 2019, from the Harringtons, Jason brought me over a check for $200,000. So he had given me $225,000 to be able to make this move. And we lived on that for the first year, just cleaning the place up. And, it's obviously been one miracle after another that's kept this place going, And so now you're there, and I stepped down about 9 months ago. I stepped down at the beginning of May this last year, because Jason, who was on our board as our president, came, and I had just brought an old friend of mine, Darlene Gagnon, in to be on my board. I needed some marketing help. They came to me with a proposition back in April that they would, do I want to keep this place? They said, "Do I want to keep this place small, serving veterans and first responders and keeping the horses we have and just keeping the place going the way we wanted it? Or do I see bigger things for this place?" Well, I've never had that retreat center off the plate, out of my mind this whole time. So I always knew that we needed to do something bigger. But I didn't know that this was the place, because I'm not sure where I'd put a retreat center there, So I said, "Well, I want it to be bigger." And they said, "Okay, well, if you're going to get the big enough donations from corporations and foundations and grants and stuff, you're going to need to really clean up your business a lot and turn it into a more professional business," because it had always been me running it as an executive director, and I don't have any executive director background of any kind, and I'd just been doing it as a volunteer. And I had Vicki and Krista and a few people who had really been helping me keep it going and keep the income coming in and keep the place running for those years. And it had been a huge help, those three. But Jason, when he came to me and said, "Okay, Darlene has agreed to step in as the interim executive director, it'll give us a chance to really grow and build this business into what we think it's going to take to be able to get the kind of donations you need to really see your vision come true." I said yes. I'm willing to step down, step away to see that happen, you know. And so I stepped away, and I've just spent the last 9 months, 10 months, something like that, not knowing that that was what I was stepping away for. At the time, it was hard. It was hard to step away because this was my baby.
Mm-hmm.
These horses were my kids. To hand them over to somebody else and say, take care of my babies for me, you know. But I recognized after about a week after I left that God was going to use this time to prepare me for the next biggest and best thing. He needed to prepare me. I couldn't, while I was working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, sleeping on an air mattress on the floor in my office.
I remember that.
Or in the wonderful camper that Jason's brother donated to us. I was, for 12 years, I was putting 100% of everything I had into that. I could not continue to do the deep dive into my spirit, into myself, and growing myself that I needed to do. And when I recognized that this retreat center, however God's going to bring it, and I don't know how he's going to bring the money. I haven't known how he's going to bring the money for any of this. However he's going to bring the land, however he's going to do this, I had to prepare myself for this because this was going to be the hardest thing yet coming up. And so I've spent the last 9 months just trusting in him to keep his hands on Henry's home and bless Darlene and Jason and the crew out there to take care of my kids, you know. And while I'm in the background now, just doing everything that I know how to prepare for whatever God says, okay, I'm ready. We're ready. Let's go with this now. Let's get started. Scared to death.
And I want you to pull the thread on that a little bit, because so many people, including myself, when I decided that it was time to retire, I want you to talk briefly about stepping out of your comfort zone and just taking that leap of faith. Because when I was a cop, that's all that I was, I don't want to say good at. That's all I knew. I wasn't a carpenter. I'm not a tradesman. I'm not a plumber, you know. It was just in my heart that I needed to do something else and I needed to step away. And I was nervous and I was scared. But once I said, all right, God, take the wheel, that I'm going to take that step. Now living down here for about 1.5 years, it was the greatest decision that I ever did. It helped me be the best person that I could ever be. If you could just touch on that, because how afraid must have you have been to take that leap and to start Henry's and to get out of your comfort zone. And you and I have talked several times about that in itself. If you could just talk about if someone's afraid to take that chance in life, or to do something to better themselves, or to listen to that little voice that they may be just kind of suppressing. And this whole podcast, I know nothing about podcasting. Zero. You know, I have a camera here.
I have a studio already.
But I also had a guy from work, my good buddy of mine, Logan Flores, a shout out to him, who kind of helped with this live setup here. You know, I know nothing about it. I'm like, help. But to be able to step out of your comfort zone, can you explain, like, go down that rabbit hole a little bit?
It's so funny because I used to have people all the time say to me, Donna, how can you sleep at night not knowing how you're going to pay the bills every month? And we weren't just a regular nonprofit, like, you close the doors and guess what, everybody goes and finds their services someplace else. I had 30 kids that were going to go to slaughter if I couldn't feed them, if I couldn't give them a home, you know. And so there was a lot of pressure. But it's funny because when I moved to Florida the first time, I had $150. I had no job, no place to live, didn't know a soul, didn't have any idea what I wanted, but I knew I wanted to get out of the cold weather. And it all worked out perfectly well. I stayed in a hooker hotel for a week for $75.
Right.
You know, and I got a job at Broward General Hospital as a respiratory therapist, and they agreed. In the next place I went to live, you know, I found a roommate situation, and they agreed to let me not pay my rent until I got my first paycheck. And it's just amazing when you have the courage. And when people used to say to me, how can you sleep at night when you don't know how you're going to make the payments every month? Because I never knew. My answer was always, I completely live in scared shitless land. there's not a minute of a day when I wasn't, since I got Henry and Lexi, really, that I wasn't scared about how I was going to pay for this, because I'd promised my husband I would never use our family money.
Really?
Ever. I told him, if I get these, when I get these, well, the fact that I have these horses, I promise I will never use a dime of our family money. And I never did. From the beginning, I used my sister's money that she had given me. And I started to pay for them by the trail riding, and then by, the income that was coming in from donations and stuff like that. But I think that if you're not courageous enough, and it takes great courage, if you're not courageous enough to follow your highest heart, stop paying attention to what your mind is telling you, stop paying attention to what society is telling you, all the people that have spent their whole life trying to mold you into being where you need to be and where they think you should be, all of that stuff, at some point in your life, you have to have enough courage to say, I can't do that any longer. I have to follow my heart. I have to follow what my highest good is. And whatever that looks like, and be willing to jump into the deep end, scared to death, but knowing, life showed me that if you're willing to jump into the deep end of following your highest good, highest excitement, and I don't mean by highest good, but highest excitement, what lights you up the most? Mm-hmm. We all have hundreds of choices that we make every day. And we can either make the choice that we're supposed to make, or we can make the choice that we want to make. And making that choice that we want to make often is the hardest thing in the world to do. But I have found personally that the only regrets I would have had in life were if I would have made the choices that I should have made.
Good point.
And I think you just have to say, I am scared to death and I'm going to do it anyways, because it's what my heart is telling me I need to do. And you're a perfect example of that. You not only left a job that's all you'd known, but you moved your family without having a clue what you were moving into here. Why did you move? Why did you move here to Texas?
What's amazing is Texas was nowhere on our radar. My wife and I thought that for years, because we love the Charleston, South Carolina area.
Yeah.
We would vacation there. We talked about for several years that, we're going to end up here. Our minds were made up. And then I remember maybe about a month or two before we decided to come to Texas, we decided to maybe look at a house in Beaufort, South Carolina. And there was a Marine couple that were stationed down there, and they were going to get deployed back over to seas. And they're like, hey, we're going to put our houses up for rent. Mm-hmm. And if you want to come down and take a look at it. And a half hour before I was going to fly down there, literally my wife was going to drop me off at the airport. They called her and said, you know what? Some other Marine family came in. They gave us our terms. We're just being honest with you. Mm-hmm. And we're like, okay, thank you. I guess this wasn't it.
That door closed.
Door closed.
God for the doors that close in our lives.
And we didn't understand it. We're like, mm-hmm. But okay, cool. Mm-hmm. So then we were like, okay, well, where do we go? I knew that a change had to be made. And that's a whole...
Hey.
So to go back, to kind of get into it, what ended up happening was I just knew that I did everything that I could ever possibly want in my career. Any unit I ever put in for, I got it. I work with some of the best people in the world and some of the best cases in the world. I just felt a shift in my heart that I needed. Mm-hmm. I spent so much time away from my family, especially as a detective. I just needed to refocus on me. I needed to refocus on them. I just felt that pressure on my heart to do something. And then when was it? In early 2022, my wife had this pretty significant health scare. And with everything going on, and I was just at my wit's end. I was tired. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, it had nothing to do with the department I was working with. Like I said, I had great leadership and everything like that. And I just remember.
But it's a high stress job.
It is.
It's taking its toll on you every minute of every day, I'm sure.
It was. And I couldn't be the best version of myself because I wasn't always present with my family. I was always thinking about other things and just getting through my day. I was going on maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 hours of sleep a day. I was on midnight shift.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, I just knew that a change needed to be made. And I just kind of suppressing it. I just kept pushing. I'm fine. And my wife started noticing, now Kelly's an angel. She truly is. And she just saw, she's like, are you okay? And she would ask me, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. You know, and I knew it.
Fine.
Yep.
Or,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm fine. I got this. I'm good. She's like, really? Really?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, yeah. And she's just like, let's talk. I just worry about you. I just feel like you're not living life the way that you should be. And what she meant by that was I was just kind of going through life in a haze. I was always tired. I was always just crabby. And I could never see the good in life anymore. And she was just concerned. And she tells me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And
thank God you've got a wife with that kind of courage.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. 100%. And I always say God and her saved me. And so anyway, to make a long story short, I was just at my wit's end, and then she got this medical diagnosis. And again, by the grace of God, she went through these scans and she went through all these tests and everything. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
And I just remember one day I was fishing and I was under a tree and I was by myself, and I told my wife, I said, I just need a day, you know. And I was out there fishing and the fish were biting, and I just remember just kind of going to my knees, and I just said, God, take it. Because he was closing a lot of doors in my life. I didn't understand why. There was no reason. I couldn't explain it.
Yeah.
And I just, and that voice just kind of kept getting louder and louder, and that pressure on my heart kind of was getting, you know, it was like he was squeezing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, why is this happening? And I just remember just literally going to my knees under this tree with my fishing pole in my hand. And I just said, take the wheel. Whatever it looks like, I concede. Take it.
That's all it takes.
And that's all it took. And then 2 months later to the day, we were living down here. And I knew nothing about Texas. So anyway, we didn't know where to go. So South Carolina was off the table. Plus, at that time, it was the prices out there were getting completely crazy. When we first started looking in like 2017, 18, the medium house ranges were about 350 to like maybe like 400,000. Mm-hmm. When we started looking 2 years ago, they were almost the exact same houses were almost $1 million. It was insane. And we're like, yeah, we're good.
California or Nevada.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're like, we just didn't know where to go. So ironically, one of my old buddies from high school lives down in the Woodlands. Mm-hmm. And I had some vacation time. I just happened to call him. I'm like, hey, man. I said, hey, how you doing? You know, and he's like, hey, what's going on? And I go, nothing. I'm on vacation. And he goes, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. His kids are grown and out of the house. And his wife was working in Colorado at the time. And he goes, I'm not doing anything this weekend. You said you're on vacation. I go, yeah. So he goes, come on down and visit me. I stuck my nose in my wife's office. She was working. I go, hey, I said, do you mind if I go see Tony? And she goes, when? And I go, tomorrow. And she goes, yeah, go ahead. I'll book the flight for you. And off I went. So I came down to visit him. And wouldn't you know, lo and behold, right across the street, there was a house for rent from his home. So we were in his backyard, you know, just relaxing, having a cocktail and a cigar. And I happened to walk out to the front and I saw the realtor and she showed us the house and I videoed it. And I brought the video home to Kelly and I just said, hey.
It's a God thing.
Oh, undoubtedly. So anyway, I show her the video and she goes, and she's never stepped a toe in Texas in her entire life. She goes, I know nothing about Texas. She goes, why don't we do this? She goes, why don't we just dip our toe in? Why don't we rent it as like a vacation home? Mm-hmm. The lease is for a year. It's cold here at Christmas. It's cold here for Thanksgiving. The house has a pool. She works remote. So she's like, okay, well, why don't we just get it? I'll go down with our kids in the summertime, enjoy the pool, enjoy the weather. And then whenever I'm off for the holidays, we'll come down and enjoy the holidays and we'll see if we like Texas. I'm like, okay, let's do it. We signed the lease. She comes down with the girls and I'm still up north working. And after a little while, I go, what do you think? You know, she's down there and she goes, I like it. I like it a lot. And I said, then let's go. She goes, wait, what? I go, then let's go. She goes, are you serious? I go, I'm 100% serious. I said, I don't want to dip my toe in. I said, if we're going to do this, let's do it with 2 feet.
Yeah.
So she goes, okay, well, what do we do? And I said, and her and I talked. We put our house up on the market. And we just said, let's just see what we get. If we get no nibbles, we'll just pull it off the market. No big deal. 24 hours. We got an all-cash offer, significantly more than what we put it on the market for. And the guy
said, hell yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? On top of it, they asked for a 10-day close.
Wow.
So she's down here, and it was maybe about 4 or 5 days before the kids had to start school. So she stayed down here. She got the kids ready for school. I packed up the entire house, and the house that we rented came fully furnished, thank God.
Yeah.
And we put all of our stuff in storage.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up I met with my deputy chief and my chief, and I just said, gentlemen, I regret to inform you, but I'm going to be retiring. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah. And like I said, I had a great relationship.
Very excited about that.
Yeah, and they're 2 great guys, and at first they didn't understand, but then I explained it to them, and they just said, hey, God bless you, and we wish you nothing but the best. And then the rest is history. And, we came down here, and like I said, it took me a while to decompress. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what my next mission was going to be. I didn't know what my next purpose was going to be.
Did you know that police officers have as bad a PTSD as anything as combat veterans have? Did you know about PTSD, about how it's more chronic and insipid, and you don't even know that you have it, but you're going to this terrible situation of pulling this child out of this burning building and then handing it to the coroner and then coming home to your daughter? Did you have any idea what that was doing to your soul?
I did, but you suppress it. Donna,
walls.
You build walls. The 2 things that I suppressed was empathy and compassion. They weren't totally gone, but you have to suppress those to be able to do what we do. When you go on those scenes, you can't get caught up in what you're seeing. You have to be an advocate for that victim, and you can't get wrapped up into what you're seeing. You have to put that aside and go, what is my mission on this call? Mm-hmm. What am I supposed to do on this call? You fix that problem, or you deal with that problem, and you just put what you just seen, whether it be a domestic violence situation, whether it be a homicide, whether it be whatever the case may be. When people call the police, they don't call you just to come on over, have a cup of coffee. Okay. It's their worst day.
The worst in everybody.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're constantly surrounded by that noise and that negativity and that evil. And then if someone doesn't have the support system at home, that just compounds the issue, and that's where it's like, I'll always salute our veterans, because what they've seen. And I don't know if I agree with it, but it's kind of funny because I have a good buddy of mine who is a Marine over in Iraq. Whenever it's law enforcement week, he always makes it a point to call me. And he's like, hey, man, thanks for your service. I go, for what? And he's like, hey, it's law enforcement week. I'm like, oh, thanks, bud. I go, but you were a Marine. He's like, yeah, I deployed 2 or 3 times. He goes, but every time you put on the uniform, you deploy. Every day that you go to work, you deploy.
That's right.
But I never saw it that way. And
every time I've ever talked to anybody in law enforcement, their attitude is, I'm just doing my job. Mm-hmm. And they don't want any credit. They don't want any accolades. They don't want any favors. They don't want any recognition of any kind. It feels uncomfortable to them because they're just doing their job.
That is 100% correct. And even when someone...
hard wall to get past, even if you're just trying to offer some good therapy like horse time, or something to them.
Even when people come up to me now, or even when I was working and they would see me in uniform, they go, thank you for your service. I was almost, I don't want to say shy or like bashful. Or
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it does. Because to me, it's just like the carpenter who's going to, build a house, or the cement guy that's going to go build a sidewalk or lay a foundation for a home.
But see, we recognize... layperson, we recognize that you're running into danger while we're all running away from danger. You're doing things that we innately instinctively know never to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it every single day, and you're seeing the suicides that are happening. And that's not talked about. We talk about veteran suicide, but we don't talk about first responder suicide. First responders have got to, if not take credit for, at least recognize the wonderful service that they're doing, just like the emergency room doctors,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people that we take for granted in this country, and COVID kind of helped us with that for a minute, recognize how important the teachers were and how important the service people were and how important the people are that we take for granted. But what you guys do, I don't know. It makes me so sad to think of why we take that for granted, or do worse, hurt you guys, slam you guys, pull your funding because we don't like the way one bad officer did something. We're going to blame every officer for doing that. Well, guess what? There's one bad football player. Do you knock out the whole NFL?
Right. And nobody, and I've said this on a previous podcast too that I recorded, is nobody hates bad cops more than good cops.
Oh, I bet.
And it's because 99, it does. And 99.999% of the people that I've worked with and the people that I know, and I've been to training classes all over the state when I was working, they're not like that. They're good-hearted, hardworking people who would die for people they don't even know without even thinking about it, just like our veterans, that would go out there, and they defend this country with tenacity and precision, and they're doing it to protect us and to protect the man and woman to the left and to the right of them. And I will always stand and salute my brothers in blue and the people who wore the military uniforms. But I just knew that it was my time to go. And I knew it was my time to see what God has in store for me in my next chapter. But I didn't know what that was. And when I left and I came down here is when I realized that what I saw did take a toll on me. And how can it not? And that's where I knew I needed to face that to be the best version of myself and be the best dad that I could be, the best friend I could be, the best husband I could be, and be the person that God truly wanted me to be on this planet. And that's where Henry's helped me tremendously. And I don't believe in coincidences at all.
I don't either.
And when I saw that, and I'm just like, it's Henry's Horse and Human Sanctuary. We're veterans and first responders. And I'm like, what? So I Googled it, and I saw your website and I read about it. I'm like, maybe this place will help me. Maybe this place will help me, because
I didn't even know that you needed help.
I didn't.
Or what could help, or what.
I didn't. And it was that stigma. And I'm like, and my wife, and she always told me too, she goes, you're not broken. But you need something, And I remember calling you, and I remember like yesterday was our very first conversation. And you're like, hey, how are you? And I explained, a little bit about who I was and what I was doing and what I needed and what I was looking for. You didn't say anything right away. And you just said, then come here. I think Henry's would be a good fit for you. And here's our next orientation. So when I came to orientation, I was nervous.
Were you?
I was. And I was scared because I didn't know what to expect. And this is the very first time that I felt vulnerable.
And you're not used to the courage it takes to be vulnerable.
Now, if you said that there is a house or we got to go in this door and there's probably 2 to 3 people with guns, me and the people that I work with, here's without even thinking about, we're running that door.
Yeah.
Now, you say go to a place where you could maybe be vulnerable or, whoa.
Talk about your feeling? Holy shit.
Yeah. Like, no, time out.
Yeah.
So I remember coming to Henry's the first time and listening to you talk and seeing all the volunteers, and within 5 to 10 minutes, just who you were and setting foot on that land. I want to talk about this, setting foot on that land. I felt literally that God put a bubble over that land. And for the first time, I felt peace. Okay. And I knew nothing about horses. I knew nothing about ranching.
Yeah.
I knew nothing. I had no idea what I was going to get into. And me being the skeptic, because when you're a cop or any first responder, you're always skeptic of what people tell you.
Sure.
And I was always waiting for that by the way. Like, okay, yeah, you can come here, but you have to do so many hours of volunteer work, or you have to pay us so many dollars a month.
What's the catch?
Yeah, like what's the catch? There was no catch.
Mm-hmm.
There was no catch at all. The attitudes from you, all of your volunteers, Krista, Carol, everybody that was there was, you served.
Yeah.
This is your time. This is built for you to come and to relax and to find yourself again. And when I started coming to Henry's, it was like every time I would drive on that property and walk out onto that property, it was like somebody put a warm blanket around me.
Isn't that weird? Everybody always said that. They always said, just driving up the driveway, I felt such a sense of peace that I haven't felt anywhere else. And we're in a neighborhood, you know, there's neighbors around us and stuff. There's a lot of beautiful trees and stuff. But when you're in something that is a God thing, you know, when you're in something that is a place where you were meant to be. And I think God's got big plans for you for that place. Maybe not where it is right now, but the retreat center, you know, someday, who knows what. I have no idea what God's got planned. I'm only taking the daily footsteps that I can to say yes in preparing for whatever it is he's got. And sounds like you're doing the same thing.
100%.
You know?
100%.
Walking away from what you know and what's familiar and what's comfortable for you is an unbelievably courageous thing. And yet that is the only way. And most people, don't you find, and your wife's diagnosis was a little bit this, most people make major changes in their lives, finally get down on their knees and say, I don't even believe in you, God, but my life isn't working right now. I need to make a change. Something's got to change. If you're out there, if there is such a thing as you, I'd like to give you a chance. You know, I'd like to say, I'll try whatever it takes. That takes a lot of courage to make a change like that. But most people need to be hit on the side of the head with a 2x4
right
before they're willing to make that change. I wasn't. I was blessed enough that I got to jump into the deep end on a regular basis on little ways to prepare me for this thing. And I just came to this earth somehow being prepared for this thing. But most people, I think, need to get hit by the side of the head with a 2x4 to make that change. But if you don't, what if you were still in Chicago?
Right. It's weird. Now looking back, God has talked to me so many times, and I just kind of was like, yeah, because I was so focused.
What do you mean by how does God talk to you? Because one of the questions that a lot of people are going to ask is, I was lucky enough to have a conversation with him, so I got a solid answer. But most people don't get that. Most people just get, you know, the small, still voice in your gut that tells you what you should do or what you shouldn't do, a door that closes or a door that opens. Those are all the ways that God talks to us. But how does God talk to you?
Exactly that way. We're now, and it's so much clearer now. And I'll talk about that too. It's so much clearer now. But looking back, like the doors that he closed previously, pre-retirement, and if I wanted to go for maybe a promotion or something that I didn't get, I'd be like, you know, like why didn't I get? Now looking back, it was like, that's why. Thank God I didn't get that. Or if just a feeling that you get in your heart and you don't understand why certain things in the universe or in your life are shifting or certain things are happening or not happening. Right. He was literally like a stagehand, like literally setting the stage so I can go live my life. And if I just needed to be obedient, I just needed to just kind of take the blinders off. But what ended up happening was I was so almost like Saul, or I had like the calluses on my eyes, and I was just kind of going through life. One of my good buddies, who's still a cop now, he goes, "We go through a state of almost like being concussed." You know, that's how I was living life, and that's how most of us as cops
taking the step.
Yeah, you're just kind of like in a maze, and you're kind of just when you get your bell rung really good, you know. And that's how I was living for so long that I didn't really pay attention to those signs then.
Yeah.
But now since I've moved and I've removed myself from all that negativity, the scales kind of fell off, and I've just been sitting there and I'm going, he's been talking to me this whole time. He's wanted me to do what I've been doing for so long. It's almost like having kids and they're running in front of you and you're like, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt yourself. Hey, come here for a second. And you keep running back and forth. Then they trip and they're like, ow. You know what I mean? Then you're like, are you ready to listen to me now? You know, and that's what I needed to do.
What a great analogy. That's a good way to think about it. And that's true. You know, we have free will. That's the one thing we were given when we chose to come onto this earth as a soul. We were given free will. And we've got an entire team behind, around us all the time. We have a guardian angel. We have a full-time, guide that's with us through our entire life. We have our spirit. Some people call it their Holy Spirit. Some people call it their soul. But our human experience, and I know people are going to think I'm a nutcase, but our human experience of what we're experiencing is only a tiny portion of who we are as a spirit and as a soul. And if we keep trying to do it ourselves, we're going to get to do it ourselves because they're in the background saying, oh my God, look what she's going to do now. Oh my God, look at that road that's going to go down.
Right.
Oh, she's going to regret that one.
Right.
Until we finally get to the point in our life where we say, okay, I'm done being on my own. I'm done trying to make all my own decisions. It's not working so good for me. I'm not very happy anymore. I need help. The first time you say to God and everybody in your team says, hallelujah, praise the Lord. She finally asked for help. It's amazing how that help comes to you.
It does.
About everything that you do every minute of your day. And the peace that it gives you.
It does. And God loves us so much. That's the other thing I want people to know is God loves us so much. And all he wants is relationship with us. He wants to have a relationship with us. And when you welcome him into your heart, it's life-changing, and hold on to the bar because this roller coaster is going to take off. And there's so many things that have happened in my life, my family's life, where it's like, I don't understand this. And then whether it be a week, a year, 2 years down the road, it's like, that's why. And thank God. And again, just to kind of go back to the Henrys, it was just a place where you can go and be yourself. And like you said, and just be with the horses. And Krista working with me with the horses and learning the horses, and Carol. And they were great, just listening to some of my stories and some of the things I needed to get off my chest. And they never criticized. They never judged. None of you did. And I needed that. And that's where I started to find myself again. And I remember with working with the horses, I was starting to feel empathy and compassion. Those two feelings that
your walls were coming down.
Especially working with Avatar, who is a retired Houston police horse. And that's where you guys knew it. And Krista was like, hey, we have this newer horse you might want to work with. I'm like, oh, really? Tell me about him. She's like, yeah, he's kind of new to the herd and he's trying to find his way. And I'm kind of like looking at her. She has like that little smirk on her face. And I go, I know where you're going with this. And he's trying to find his way. And I think you two might be a good fit for each other. And it was.
Yeah.
And I remember walking into his...
Excellent at being able to pick out what horse needs what person and what person needs what horse.
And I remember walking into his, the one little paddock, where he was feeding for the first time. And I remember walking in and he just kind of, cops know a look. Okay, from a cop to a cop, we know a look. And I remember him looking over his right shoulder at me. And he just kind of was like, yeah, what's up? And he just kind of kept eating. And I just said, hey, how you doing, buddy? And he just he wanted nothing to do with me. And I remember I walked around to like his right, his right side. He turned his back to me. He did. He literally, and he was just, and I'm like,
you can't force those horses to do anything. They've got to want you. They've got to want to build a relationship with you. How did you make that happen?
God's grace. So I let him, I gave him some room and I just backed up and I just talked to him, for me about a half hour. And I just kind of came up to him and I did, the horseman handshake and I just started petting his mane. And he just finally just kind of came to and he stopped eating and I ended up talking to him. And then I would go in there every time. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time with him, but every time I would come on property, I would spend a little time. I would talk to him. I would ask Krista if he could have an apple, and I would give him a little bit of apples, and then I was able to groom a lot of the other horses, like Shiloh and Admiral.
Yeah.
And that just helped me to be able to talk and even to them, and their little personalities and making me laugh and feel a human again.
Yeah.
So to get back to my original story, I remember when you planted those flowers, like right by the flagpole,
Mm-hmm.
and then right by, because like I don't think it's there anymore, like where the carriage,
Yeah, the carriage house.
where the carriage house was. I remember I was sitting at the picnic table, but where the kitchen is,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember one day the sun was just shining on those flowers some particular way, and I remember there was a couple butterflies flying around them. And as I was looked up and I saw these flowers, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was able to see the colors. I was able to see the veins in every single one of the petals.
Mm.
I was able to smell them. I was able to see their beauty. And again, it was like those scales completely fell off my eyes. And I was able to see the world for the beauty that it has in it. I wasn't so much caught up in the darkness. And I actually thought to myself, I'm like, I feel human again. Because when I was working, if I would have just came to Henry's, I would have saw those flowers. If I was with you, if I was with my wife, my kids, they would have said, "Oh my God, Dad." I go, they would say, "Look how beautiful these flowers are." I'd be like, yeah, great. They're beautiful.
Right.
But for the first time,
you had blinkers, and you had to have blinkers on to be able to live the life you were living. But when you can, I wonder if you can live the life as a cop and still somehow figure out how to let those blinkers go. Do you have to leave the force? Do you have to?
There are people that can do it.
Really?
For me, I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah.
I had to remove myself, to truly see, and to be able to see my life come back into focus again. And I wasn't so focused on the negative anymore. And then about a week or two after, I remember having that experience at Henry's. I remember I was going on a walk with my wife, and we were that's what we do. On Saturdays, we go for walks.
Yeah.
And I remember looking up at the sky, and the sky was just blue, and the clouds were as white as cotton balls. And she looks at me and she goes, "Are you okay?" I go, "What are you talking about?" And she's like,
"We're having a story."
Yeah, right. She goes, "You just said, look how beautiful the sky looks.
Yeah.
Look how beautiful the clouds look." I go, "Yeah, do you see it?" She goes, "Yeah, I see it all the time." She goes, and then she looked at me and she grabbed my hand and she stopped me and she goes, "Is it possible that I could be getting my husband back?"
Oh my God.
And it's the truth. And I go, "Yeah." And I go, and I give all the glory and honor to God, 100%, without a doubt.
Give it to yourself though, because if we don't forget who we are as souls, as a cell in the body of God, as unconditional love, then we won't have an opportunity for growth. Because we only grow through the tough times that we go through the decisions that we make and regret sometimes. And that you live in a world that is, just like you said, you're seeing the worst of the worst in people. Everybody has good and bad. We all have our shadow sides. We all have our good sides. But most people have learned to cover up their good side or run away from it because of the trauma they've had in their lives. So as a cop, you only see the trauma-induced shadow side of most people.
Yeah, and for so long, it's like, you see the thing, and it wasn't every day, but, you see the things that you see.
But it's starting.
Whether it be our veterans, whether it be our first responders, whether it be medics, firemen, cops, you see these things, and then it's like, you only have about a half hour, maybe an hour on your drive home to try to decompress after you've seen some of the worst of the worst. And then you want to go home, and you're expected to go home, and you're expected to be the dad. You're expected to be the wife or the husband. And it's like, I was blessed because my wife, especially when I was a detective, and I would be gone sometimes for 2 or 3, 4 days in a row on a big case, and I would sleep behind my desk, for just a couple hours.
Yeah.
She would always hold the fort down. I never once in 10 years when I was a detective, or even when I was even a street cop, the kids needed to go wherever they needed to go with their activity. She never once complained. And when I came home, a lot of times there was a warm meal just waiting for me. "Hey, sorry you missed dinner. Good night."
Boy, that kind of support.
Oh, I'm blessed.
I can't imagine trying to get through that kind of a life without that kind of support.
But a lot of people don't have it.
I bet they don't.
And that's where, those people, when life becomes too much, because you're constantly bombarded by the negativity, whether it be at work, and then you have to go home, and then you may have a bad home life there, and you're bombarded by negativity, and you just can't get away from it. And that's the thing where it's like, don't be afraid to seek help, whether it be counseling, whether it be going to talk to clergy, whether it be just a quiet room, just reach out to God, talk to God, ask him to come into your life, whatever a place like Henry's. And that's the beautiful thing, is that there's no judgment. There was no ever any judgment at Henry's or criticism. You could be who you are. And that's what I needed at that moment.
And that's why we dropped our whole equine psychotherapy program, was so that we could let our veterans come out and hammer boards and nails, on the board if they wanted to, and be a part of this thing.
Yeah.
And that was, I'm glad to hear that you're still being able to do what you need to do out there, not just get, but give.
100%. And I feel bad because I haven't had a chance to go out there, because I'm trying to get this, this whole podcast up and going. So I haven't had a chance to go out there as much as I'd like to. I think the last time I was out there was for your retirement party. Unfortunately, yeah. But, and that's what was great and that's what we try to instill in our children too, is, the world owes you nothing. And if someone's going to extend a hand to you, give back, because we've been blessed with so much, and you gave me a place to relax and to find myself again. And it's like, I would feel so odd, like you said, to just sit there and watch everybody do what they did.
I would hate that. If I couldn't go out and pick up a manure or mow or do something,
right,
pitch in, I would absolutely hate it.
Right. And I remember exactly that. It was like, there were times I never worked so hard physically in my life out there, but I enjoyed every minute of it. And I would come home and I would just I'd take a shower and I would just kind of sit on the couch, I needed that. And
being outside and doing that kind of work, even if it's just mowing your own yard, it's something, we're meant to get out and do hard physical work where you get to see what you've accomplished at the end of it, not just at the gym, where you're working out and stuff, but opportunities. And, I've been studying happiness a little bit lately, and happiness is not a goal that we should ever seek. You should never try to be happy. I'm going to do this because this makes me happy. Happiness is a byproduct of how you live your life, the choices you make. And one of the most common ways to find happiness is by giving, by doing something for somebody else. That gives you not only happiness, but it also gives you a feeling of abundance. And when it comes to abundance, we think of abundance as just money, but it's time. I was probably more scarce in time than I was in money when I was running Henry's home.
Really?
Putting in 16-hour days.
Really?
A week.
Yeah.
Because I spent all of my time running around doing stuff. If I wasted a minute in traffic, it pissed me off. It stressed me out, because that was a minute I could be spent doing something else that was needed to be done, writing a grant or whatever, But we have all kinds of abundance in our life that we miss out on. And when you do something for somebody else, even if you're in a hurry and you don't have the time to do that, but you help the little old lady across the street or whatever it is, that also gives you a feeling of abundance of time too. There's all kinds of ways that we need to find happiness, and seeking it is not the way.
And that's primarily the whole purpose behind this podcast, is to still continue to serve by inspiring people, by giving people hope, by informing people. And we've had plenty of conversations. And when I was manifesting this, and I was talking to my wife about this and doing this, and she's always been supportive. And she's like, follow, if it's on your heart, do it. And what's kind of funny is she's
so incredible.
And I know not everybody could come to Henry's, but it's the message behind that you shared, where it's like stepping out of your comfort zone and listening to your heart.
Yes. Say yes to the difficult things. Say yes to the courageous things. Say yes even when it's, impossible and ridiculous.
Yeah.
What is the possibilities that I could manifest $500,000 a year out of the air to keep this place going? And yet all I did was say yes and put the work in and be willing to do the work. And that's what you're finding with the podcast and stuff. Just do the work. Yeah.
And that's it. And research and do what you got to do. Now, what are some things that you have coming on the horizon? I know that you were talking about maybe writing a book, possibly. Is that?
And I've spent about the last 9 months writing my biography, and I've got the basic biography done. But now I've got to start tying in the spiritual lessons that I've learned into that biography, and I'll probably spend the next months doing that. And I have absolutely no idea why I'm writing this book, because I can't imagine that anybody's going to give two flips for my life.
I cannot be more excited to read that book.
It's truly the story of my life and the story of the sanctuary. And I believe someday it might be the story of the retreat. I don't know, but I'm just doing a deep dive into watching as many podcasts as I can, paying attention to for me, it's paying attention to what resonates with my heart, because I listen to speakers and listen to books that I bought or got from the library or something that I a little bit into it and I realize I'm not buying that. My heart's not saying yes to that, so I pass it by and go to the next one. And really resonating with who I am as a soul here on earth, coming to serve others, which we have a choice as our polarity. We get to serve ourselves or we get to serve others. And I chose to serve others when I came here, apparently. Mm-hmm.
I can't wish you enough luck with all of your next endeavors and with your retreat and your book.
I can't wait to see how, like I said, I have no idea how God's going to use this book, but if he's got me writing it, then it's for a reason. I'm building up what I need to build up personally to be able to be ready for this retreat. I think he's preparing you for this retreat to be involved some way. I think he's preparing a whole bunch of people to be involved in this. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know anything about it, and I'm not supposed to.
Right.
We're supposed to say yes to our best choices, our most exciting and choices that we're drawn to the most. We're supposed to let go of what we expect from them. Mm-hmm. And if I would have said, no, I'm not going to take this land during Henry's, because it doesn't look exactly like what I think it should look like. I would have stopped the process. I would have gotten in the middle of what God was doing.
Right.
God is doing incredible things in a lot of people's lives right now. If they will just say yes, and can you help me, please?
Yep.
That's it. That's all it takes.
And that's all you did. And that's all I did.
You did, yeah. All you did.
And it's just great, how God works. He does work in mysterious ways. And I also just wanted to mention, too, if you want to hear, obviously, more of Donna, too, you were on your daughter's podcast. Your daughter has a podcast.
She has a Perfectly Broken podcast.
I know I've listened to her on Spotify.
Spotify, yeah. I've only done a couple on hers. She's wonderful. She's a young girl that when my husband died a couple of years ago, and he was 91 and just died of old age in his sleep, it just died in a perfect way after a good long life. But she came home to help me with that, and she just stayed. And I've been just really blessed to have her staying at home. And that's when she had her kind of spiritual awakening, because growing up in a religion doesn't mean you have anything about God in your heart. That's something you got to make your own decision about. At some point, yes, I want some help, or no, I can do this on my own, Right. And so she's got a wonderful podcast that's talking all about vulnerability and the courage that it takes to be able to be vulnerable. I'm just kind of behind the scenes building whatever it is God's preparing for this thing.
Very good. Very good. Well, I just, and wrapping this up, Donna, I wanted to say, I can't wait to see what God has in store for you. I know he has amazing things for you.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to see what you're going to do in your life too. This is, just, if you can tell your readers, just say yes and just take the actions. Amen. Follow your heart. Amen. Let him do the rest. Amen. It's an amazing life to live.
It is. And it's one heck of a ride too.
It is.
So
not going to be easy.
No.
Just going to be amazing.
It truly is. So thank you to you for everything that you've done for me. Everybody at Henry's, all the volunteers, everybody that's there, and all the things that they're doing great.
They're doing a great job. They're watching out over my babies, and I just can't wait to see what all God's got in store for them.
I know. Me too. So thank you again. Please like and subscribe, and you'll find my information through all my social media down in the description. And thank you again.